What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Blade Dive, episode 22. And it's come from the support of you, the listener. I am so stoked you're tuned in right now, and I'm excited to be at episode 22. If you want to know how you can support the podcast beyond what you're paying for data on your cell phone or internet bill, you can do a couple of things. One, you can subscribe to the channel. It would mean a lot to me. You can follow us on social media at The Blade Dive. And lastly, you can tell a friend. That's how this thing grows organically. You can definitely tell a friend. If you're stoked on what you're hearing, tell somebody they should check out the podcast. Okay, my guest today is Joe Genovese, and Joe is somebody that I used to work for, but we have a different connection too, and that's that my aunt taught Joe 7th grade math. Crazy. Small world. We might talk about that in the episode. Joe has run the gambit with his career and has been at places like June Mountain, Massanutten, Wintergreen Resort, Mount Hood, Mountain High, Mammoth. I mean, he's been so many places, and he's currently contributing to Seven Springs in Pennsylvania. Fair to say the guy knows what he's doing in the park world. Joe describes his experience at Superpark and how he got those opportunities, as well as his journey to all those different places and some of the things that he's experienced along the way. We do talk a little shop, little business. We talk about people, but we talk about how we take care of employees, what it means to be able to stimulate them, spur them on so that they can get stoked on whatever it is that they're a part of within an operations department. We talk about the future and how we get kids, people, moms and dads excited about accessible snowboarding. I mean, that's the best way I could put it. But we also talk about some funny times, some stories, so you're going to want to stay tuned. This episode is riddled with special guest questions, and I wouldn't have it any other way because people love talking to Joe. Now is a really good time to thank our sponsor, Prenoth. The Blade Dive podcast is supported by them. If you're at home right now, grab your favorite drink, kick your feet up, and if you're in the machine anywhere in the world, turn up the volume.
Good, and give it the juice. Already.
Okay, man, we are back in the virtual booth today, and I mean, to be completely honest, I'm really glad to be in the virtual booth now, because I've been dealing with washing machine CPU boards all day, and I'm over that, for sure. Joe Genovese is my guest today, and if you don't know Joe, really quick, not to be too repetitive with the introduction I just ran, Joe has been all around North America and has spent time with some incredible people, incredible resorts, and terrain park programs. Massanutten, Wintergreen, Mountain High, June Mountain. I mean, the list goes on, but he's been a part of some Superpark events and has worked with some incredible people throughout his career in the industry to really develop a sense of style and aesthetic to what parks and park riding looks like over the decades that he's been contributing. So, Joe, how are you, man? Welcome.
I'm great, Parker. I think you might be selling me a little bit short there, though.
Well, we could get into measuring the length of things later if we need to. But yeah, man, welcome. Stoked you're here.
No, man, thank you for having me on. This is awesome. The show's great. The guests have been great, and it's like catching up with old friends, for a couple hours at a time.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, man. And like I've already mentioned, it's an honor to have you on the show. We've worked together in the past, and I'm excited to get your 2 cents on, well, all things that are Joe Genovese. We've been doing something, as I'm sure you're aware of, kicking things off with a special guest question. It's kind of our piece of flair that we add every episode in the Blade Dive. So what do you think? You cool with that?
Absolutely.
Sweet. And as I was putting this thing together, this whole conversation, I didn't think that this could happen without just multiple special guests, because everybody loves talking to Joe, talking to you. So the first one comes from Mr. Matt Mueller. I will play it for you now. Here we go.
What's up, Blade Dive? This is Matt Mueller, and I have a question for Joe. First, I'd like to say, Joe, amazing work on your OnlyFans page. I mean, the content is just amazing. I can't thank you enough for that. But my question is, you've been to Superpark, I think, 25 times, and there's only been like 22 of them. And I'm curious what you think keeps getting you invited back. And I would say a lot of people think it's your perfectly cut hips, the transition that just rides amazing, the size of the features. Um, I would say it's your personality and charisma and overall positive attitude. But I'd like to hear it from you, what kept you going back, and why you think you had a spot there for so many years. Well, thanks, Blade Dive, for letting me ask Joe that question. And Joe, to answer your question, yes, I am recording this on the toilet. Have a good one, guys.
Oh, Mr. Matt Malilly, so good to hear from you. Um, I'm proud to say I don't know what an OnlyFans page is. Um, that's honest. That's total shoot right there. I've never heard of it, but if there is one, I didn't do it. If if there's any like 1 to 2 words that can sum up why I've been to so many super parks, that would be coattails. I've been riding other people's coattails. Started with Dave Franzen, went twice with Eric Rosenwald and the Mammoth team. Um, Joel Rarico and Seven Springs crew a few times. The last year was the first time I ever got invited. Joel didn't go, so I kind of got to run the show with the crew. And that was super fun and an honor, especially since we don't know if there will be another one. Hopefully it comes back. One of my most favorite events. Definitely get to meet a lot of super cool people, Matt included. I was really hoping you'd ask me the question about what the definition of taking a number 3 is, because you taught me. Hands-on learning experience. But no, man, Superpark's been an amazing part of my career, and definitely a standout, and always fun working with Pat. And you know, I think I just know what Pat wants, and he wants to communicate. He wants to tell you what to do because he has a vision, and he just likes people to execute and be done on time. TJ, but it's honestly been an amazing thing to be a part of so many times over and over again. Definitely career highlight right there.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned something I thought was cool. Obviously, you knowing what Pat wants. Pat Bridges, formerly Snowboarder Mag, now All Things Slush magazine. You bring up a good point just about the build team being on time, obviously, but how do you get that invite? And who and what does that build team look like to be a part of that?
Well, to another thing that Pat likes is at least a 2-man build team. He wants, like, if you're a good builder and you're at a resort and you don't have a solid number 2, he sees that as, a little bit of a weakness, I think. And he wants to know that, like, you've got multiple people there capable of doing the job, basically.
Yes, I think that's the key word. And I think that's a fair call, too, with respect to risk management. What features are going to be built? Who's building them?
Absolutely, because it is a 24-hour operation once you get there. You've been there. It's
I have. Fun times.
You got to have leadership around the clock for sure.
Yeah, and I think my favorite part was, welding in the rain at Meadows.
I completely forgot you were there. That was, I felt so bad for you.
There are all kinds of things that I have as takeaways throughout every piece of what I've been a part of, and that one was, that was a good time. Shout out to Rosie there for that one. I appreciate Matt Malilly taking the time to record that question, especially on the toilet. Irrespective of time is definitely, you can't get it back. So Matt, Thanks so much for contributing to the Blade Dive. True to my word, we'll continue with the special guest questions, and I did mention that they're going to be all throughout the episode. And just so that the boys from Diamond Peak can deliver the 1-2 punch, your next special guest question comes from Mr. Timothy Hay.
Thank God.
Thankful he's on board. I'll go ahead and play it for you now, Joe.
Hey, what's up, Blade Dive? Timmy Hay here. Got a question for Mr. Genovese. What percentage of credit do you take on the first ever sea box? And do you think if every Tom, Dickie, and Jerry knew that you were the creator of the sea box, that you would have more Instagram followers? Keep up with the good work. Keep being awesome. Keep listening to Sheryl Crow. Talk to you later, bud.
I mean, almost 0% credit for it, to be perfectly honest with you. That came about at Mountain High in the parking lot. I know Day Franzen was there building features before I'd moved out there. And one of the people from Massanutten that moved out there at the same time, Brad Harper, was helping Day build rails. And I'll tell you exactly how it came about. I hope I'm not raining on Day, hope Day didn't want to tell the story, but realistically what happened was they cut out the plywood side, sheeting for Rainbow Box. And Day picked up one of the cutouts that was in a C shape and was like, what if we made a box like this? And as the story goes, as I've heard it, is Brad walked over and said it would work if we did it like this and tilted it. That's the C box. That's where it came from.
Wow.
And I can't remember if it was built before I got there or if it was started, but I can't take any credit for that. The only credit I kind of take is the one at Superpark, because that was me and Sean Durst trying to build that thing in the parking lot at Breck. And that was a interesting day, to say the least. But yeah, that's my only claim to fame with the C box. Was the first when people really saw the gold C box. Was that was me and Durst and Day. Day spent most of the time in the cat at that event. But yeah, that's my only contribution to the C box.
Damn. Well, I do want Day to weigh in. I want Franzen to come on the show. So I'll switch gears here quickly. Superpark per diem with respect to food. There was always this crazy array of food showing up in the fridge. Did you ever have any say in what was bought? I'd be curious to know that.
Oh, man, I can't really go too deep in this without incriminating myself. Because, I've never been a part of Superpark per diem. Pat's always bought us food. And it's like he walked straight to the hot dog aisle and just loaded up his cart with, I don't know what that guy eats, on a normal basis, but apparently it's a lot of hot dogs and bologna and sandwich meats and steaks. And, apparently we're supposed to go through a gallon of mayonnaise in 2 weeks. Yeah, it's the most random stuff.
Yeah, it is. Well,
that's all.
Well, I had to ask because, being there and remembering what was in the fridge and seeing the purchases, I was just always flabbergasted. But there was this gallon-sized jar of pickles.
Well, I got some ideas for those. But no, it's always a struggle. And then this last year at Crystal Mountain that we went, we had a dorm fridge and all this food, there was nowhere to put it. There was no way we could, and, Pat would always send out that group text, after a few days, after everybody bitched about just the Oscar Mayer, refrigerator, what do you want? And the responses would just always be veggies and capital letters, and I don't know how much how many vegetables are in his diet, but it never. I think that's when the pickles came.
Yeah, well,
You know.
yeah, totally. It was just always funny because there was usually a list that was made, and then food would come back. Some folks wouldn't be around, and then I just wasn't. And I remember opening the fridge and just saying to myself, "That is the biggest damn jar of pickles I have ever seen in my entire life. Like, what are we supposed to do with those?" I appreciate the insight though. Well, and then, too, like, we could talk about park stuff and Superpark stuff, and I'm sure we'll get into more, but one of the things we do on the Blade Dive is we talk about you. We talk about what it was like being Joe Genovese during either your career, your childhood growing up, how much detail you're willing to go into, but I want to know, selfishly, but what was it like growing up as Joe Genovese? Help us out. Paint that picture and tell that story for us, man, if you could.
I was born outside of D.C. in Northern Virginia. If you've ever flown into Dulles Airport, my house, you could see the airport from there when it was still in the middle of a field ages ago. But yeah, born there and ended up at Massanutten Resort when I was in the 5th grade. My mom wanted to finish college, and we moved to Harrisonburg, Virginia, and well, we actually moved to Massanutten in the resort. And I'd never heard of a ski resort before. This is probably 1990, and once I found out that you could slide down a hill and there was a way to get you back up, for at the time, $10, $15 for a night ticket, I was all in. So that's about when it started for me. Was 90, 91, I believe, was the first time I rented a snowboard. Thanks to some local friends, they turned me on to skateboarding, number one being Jeremy Klein, deaf kid, for those of you that know him. Sold me my first skateboard, sold me my first snowboard, and honestly never looked back, man. Like, it was all I ever wanted to do as a kid. Pretty much snowboarding and playing music is all I've ever been truly passionate about. And luckily I fell into the right situation to where snowboarding was a possibility, at such a young age. I think I was 11 or 12 at the time.
Yeah, well, and we're going to talk about the snowboarding passion that you have too, but, being 11 or 12 and passionate about music as well is quite interesting, dude. I didn't know that. And I have to ask, was music on the same level of passion as snowboarding? And were you any good? Like, that's another thing I would want to know too. Were you doing the band thing at all or no?
Well, when I was a kid, I collected baseball cards. Like, I don't know, like every suburban kid did. And I don't know what happened one day. I had a friend down the road that had an electric guitar. I think he played guitar in his church band. And one day he collected cards too. And one day I said, I'll give you every single baseball card I own for that electric guitar. And he said yes.
Wow.
Yeah. He agreed to it. His mom was pissed. But
no,
but
I bet.
But no, like,
she was probably going, "Hey, we need to work on your negotiation skills."
So I knew, I was never going to do well with the chicks with a stack of baseball cards, but I knew with a guitar I had a chance. That's all I did was just try to play music, before you could just look up a YouTube video on how to do it. But yeah, I played in bands through high school. That was always what I did in the off season. Sometimes during the season, sometimes it overshadowed snowboard season, because for a while there, the music was more important to me, because I saw, delusional kid, you're like, I'm going to be a rock star, seems more attainable than I'm going to be a pro snowboarder. So yeah, my career ambitions were not very great, put it that way.
Well, irrespective of that, what was the band's name?
Really, like, I played with the same group of guys for the longest time. Oh geez, I really can't remember the names. Oh, okay. I've got the best and the worst. I can't even say this. I don't know. Want people to know this, honestly. But yeah,
Dude, come
I was in a funk band called Cornbread Mafia.
Oh my word. Oh God, this is amazing. This is like tidbits of Joe Genovese that I didn't know we were gonna get. This is dope. Cornbread Mafia. Oh my. Oh man. Well, I gotta ask, like, were you lead vocals, guitar? What were you playing?
I mean, well, through high school and stuff, I played a lot of guitar, and we were basically like a grunge cover band. Most of the way through is a lot of Smashing Pumpkins, Nirvana, that type of stuff. The funk band kind of came later, and that's what I was playing bass then. I got really into playing the 4-string bass, and yeah, I don't. It was just a reason to get drunk and play loud music with your friends and go to dumb parties and stuff. It was never too serious. Don't the best we ever were was in like the 10th grade, 11th grade, and we weren't old enough to go out and play clubs. So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways,
Well, I have to ask this too, based on you taking music seriously enough. Did you ever create a demo mixtape for somebody to listen
we
to?
did.
Okay.
We did. We had a 4-track and like could ping pong and like make like 16 tracks, but it was analog and makeshift mic stands for the drums and just we tried our asses off, but like there was like literally 2 places you could play in Harrisonburg at the time, and I think you had to be over 21 or at least 18 to play one of them, so we were screwed from the get-go.
Now, fair enough. Well, maybe we'll move on, but
Yeah,
I got one more guitar question and then we'll move on. But do you still play? I'd be interested to know if you still play at all.
yeah, I still play, and I definitely cheat and watch on YouTube how to play it because I don't have the patience that I did when I was bored and 12 in my basement.
Still cool though, nonetheless. I do. Let's jump back into you. You mentioned something super interesting, Massanutten, and you pretty much being in the resort, right? Like you grew up in Massanutten. Is that a correct statement?
Absolutely, yep. We moved on property in Massanutten Village, probably 3 miles from the base of the chairlift, one of the chairlifts and the lodge and everything. And what it turned into was, for $190, you could get a season night pass. And for my mom, bless her heart, mother of 6, that was the cheapest babysitter she could find for me. So for $190, she didn't have to worry about Joe for 3+ months. Um,
Wow.
I'd thumb it up the hill and thumb it down the hill if I had to, or catch rides with friends. We had a pretty good posse of kids snowboard. There's probably a good dozen of us that are for the most part still friends of this day. But we're talking like middle schoolers to freshmen in high school, like pack of kids that really were passionate about snowboarding, and like that's all we cared about. Well, for a fourth of the year, a third of the year, whatever. The rest of the time, it was just like you know playing music and skateboarding, really. Uh, and we didn't fit in that area, that's for sure. Um, we were our own little clique, and it was actually really awesome to be a part of. I won't lie, it was really cool in hindsight.
Yeah, super cool indeed. And that's again like that access. You're there, you're on property. That's pretty awesome.
Yep.
You've got that there. But you mentioned night skiing. Were you ever able to take advantage of skiing and snowboarding during the day? I'd be curious.
If we got to snowboard during the day, that was special. That meant we snuck on the beginner lift on a Saturday, and they didn't check that the fact that we didn't have valid passes for the day, and we get up to chair 6 or whatever, and like if we could ride during the day, that was like a gift. um up until we're old enough to work there and have an employee pass. But we were the little night kids, and you know it's funny because like I've got to give a shout out to my dear friend Mr. Aaron Hawkins, who started the terrain park program up there. Um, he started it early. We were like 1990. We had a dedicated park trail with a J bar. Um, and I remember like catching wind that we had a park. Well, we didn't know it because it wasn't open at night. And I remember hiking up there for the first time in the dark, like six of us like poking around, like, oh my God, like somebody made a jump on purpose. Like, and we just started hiking it, in the pitch black pretty much. Um, it was a really cool moment, like for us, because we had been getting kicked out of the resort for building jumps off sides of trails and, stacking up moguls or, water bars or whatever we could hit, to get off the ground. So that was a really defining moment for us. Actually getting provided the playground, that we first of all never heard of or thought of, and then all of a sudden it's there.
That
it was amazing.
that was such a great way to describe that. Wow. I remember that feeling as if it were yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're just trying to get on snow any way you can, and because you're excited about it, but side hits, water bars, anything that maybe the mountain left out is like something that you could make a base with to put a jump together or slide on or do anything with. Like that was definitely a rogue thing that we did all the time growing up, but I remember that like it was yesterday. That was such a good way to describe that, Joe, for sure. Yeah.
Yep. And that honestly like kind of gave us a in, because we got to know the park crew at the time, which I don't need to rattle off all their names, but it was um, Aaron Hawkins was the guy that started it all there. But once we got in with him, it's kind of like, hey, if you come out on a Saturday, because we had a half pipe too, but it was completely hand dug. He's like, hey, if you come out on Saturday, we would dig to ride. So that gave us the opportunity to go snowboard during the day and realize that there was a small but growing culture in the sport in the area. A lot of kids from Charlottesville and Richmond and Northern Virginia, and eventually the snowshoe kids came over. It was quite the scene, man. It was actually just a really, really, really cool thing to be a part of at that age. Very influential, 13, 14, 15 years old, and having this older group of guys that were paving the way. It was awesome.
Because of things like that, getting a foothold, figuring out what was possible, memorable experiences, were you at one point already thinking, hey, what's possible? Look at what they're doing out west, or look at what they're doing here and there. I know the media coverage was all over the shop at that point, but were you looking elsewhere or no?
Geez. Honestly, at that point, it was like we started doing like, the local events. Like we started getting like these Edge of the World events and the USA essays. And that pushed some of us to travel, as far as like snowshoe pretty much. Some of the kids took it super seriously and, made it to nationals and everything. But no, I mean, it wasn't until probably, I was graduated high school and actually got a job working at the resort that I started thinking about going somewhere else to do it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, well, that wasn't until a little bit later. At the time, it was just like, it was super cool because like the guys that ran the park too all played in the band together, and yeah, it was a neat thing to be a part of.
Yeah. I mean, excuse me, it sounds like it for sure. The opportunities that you were creating.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, just on snow, but then the night riding and the day riding, and realizing the day riding opportunities were special. So, super cool.
Yeah.
I have to ask though, Ginger Carrico was your 7th grade math teacher. She's my aunt. Was that in Harrisonburg?
Ginger Carrico was my math teacher, but I didn't move to Harrisonburg. She taught at Montevideo Middle School, and your aunt was my 7th grade math teacher.
Such a small world.
Yep.
Well, I do have a special guest question from Ginger Carico.
Oh boy.
So I will go ahead and play that for you now. Here we go.
Hi, Joe. My question is, as you're given the task to create different terrain parks, what math skills do you use to create the jumps that are designed to be challenging not only for beginners, but also for the intermediates and the experts? Do you brainstorm and use scale drawing for the jumps? Do you calculate slope as a ratio, an angle, and a percent? I'm asking you this because these are all 7th grade math skills, and I sure am hoping that you are using some of those concepts that I taught you at Montevideo. This question is coming from Ginger Carico, your 7th grade pre-algebra teacher.
Wow. What planet is this?
Oh man, well I was laughing too because I was wondering what she was listening to in the background or watching. Was it sounded like Days of Our Lives or something? I don't know. Oh my god.
No, it was so crazy to hear her voice again. That's nuts. I mean, that question's pretty, I mean, we use everything, obviously. Parent slope, pitch, takeoff angle, like radius, like everything comes into it. And I know she wants me to get all technical about math and stuff, but the way I've always described it is jump building's it's the perfect mix between geometry, physics, and art. And that's what keeps me into it. I like all three of those things. And but no, as far as the math, 7th grade math skills, like pay attention, kids. One day you could be me. But
no, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, you sit there in class and you're like, what am I ever gonna use this for? And then it's like, next thing you know, you're in the mid to late 20s, like trying to relearn it. Like, wish I would have paid attention. But no, everything comes into play, and like you know the industry and how in depth it's gotten with all the testing and without getting too deep into the risk side of things, but just with jump dynamics and physics, and it's way deeper than 7th grade. We'll put it that way. Not that I'm highly involved with that, but I'm highly interested in it. But no, thank you very much, Ginger. I've never called you by your first name, but thanks for the question. That was great.
What was that weird calling her by her first name?
It was.
Out of body experience. Yeah, what planet are we on? I will say though, shout out to Ginger for contributing. Always awesome to involve family, especially when they want to contribute. It was awesome.
Well, we have to.
Yeah.
I think we have to explain to your audience a little bit more that it's not like we grew up down the road from each other. It was just pretty random that it turns out that your aunt was my teacher.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can go back to Cooper's degrees of separation with Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's not like I have met tons of people that have similar stories. We just all have very common interests, and the common interest is the snow industry, the snow world, or if you want to label them as action sports, I feel like that's a buzzword. But Cooper was telling the story of how he grew up on the same road that I believe your parents lived on, something like that, or one of your parents.
Oh yeah, his parents grew up. He grew up on the same road my dad lives on, in Loudoun County, Virginia, and there's no line paint on that road. To sum it up, it's you got to slow down and scoot over for an oncoming car. It's pretty random. It's a really small road called Mountain Road, and yeah, that was a definite crazy small world moment. Which I've had a few, but that one's probably the biggest one, because thank God I met that guy, for one.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've had a lot of good times and done some really cool things together. I just got to see him last week, 2 weeks ago now.
Super cool. Hey, I guess pay attention in 7th grade math, kids.
Pay attention. Yep.
Yes, you can, and you can also relearn it too on YouTube if you need to.
There is.
There's that out there. But I gotta know too, like you and your definition of how you maybe wanted to be involved in snowboarding. When did that grab a hold of you, and what did that experience look like?
I latched onto it really quickly, at a pretty young age. I was on a $75 black snowboard with $20 duck boots. I didn't own a pair of snowboard boots until, oh gosh, I bought a pair of blacks before I went to snowshoe one time, like counted pennies. Like I was the jeans kid. And nobody cared, like they would do what they could to help me. Like, hey man, like I've got an extra pair of snowboard pants if you want to quit wearing jeans up here. And I'm like, really? Okay. Unmatching gloves that I found at Lost and Found. Like we were not the typical ski resort family by any means. We were fortunate enough to have the opportunity to live there, but everything else came a bit harder. But those guys didn't care. Like they saw that I was just there to snowboard and like, have fun and, get hurt, and just charge it, and got a ton of support from people around me. And it was just, like I said, it was the fun group to be a part of. There's no other way to put it. Like, and you fast forward a couple years, like the guys running the park are going to James Madison University. They're going to school up the road in Harrisonburg. And they're the cool kids on campus and, at the resort. And next thing you know, you're like 14, 15 years old getting invited to the weekend parties. And, then you just see yourself as one of the cool kids. And yeah, again, I can't stress enough like the culture that we had there. What it brought to your plate, like when I don't want to say I didn't have much, but like I don't know, it just I loved it. It's what I love to do. I love being with my friends. I love snowboarding. I loved going to band practice. I loved like all of it. All of it was fun. And that's all I ever wanted was just to have fun,
Yeah, no, it's such a good point. At the end of the day, that should be all that really matters. I'd want to know, too, if machines were a part of your life early on as a kid, or if not, when did they become a part of maybe who you are or what you're involved in now?
No, never a part of my life. Besides, like, the Tonka trucks, in the sandbox as a kid. And then, building, I grew up riding dirt bikes, too. I haven't mentioned that, but, like, I was always on a bike from age 5 on till like 13 or 14. And we used to build dirt jumps for those, on my dad's property. But I never ran a piece of equipment besides a lawnmower until I got thrown into a snowcat.
Right on. Very cool.
Yep.
Well, were you literally thrown into a snowcat? I have to ask. Or were you presented the opportunity?
So in 1999, I got a job making snow at Massanutten, thanks to the great Mike Mueller. I haven't mentioned his name yet, but when those parks were starting in the early 90s, he was the guy running the snowcat. He was the mountain operations manager at Massanutten. And, Hawkins and then this guy Justin would ride shotgun with him and tell him what to do. And he actually physically built the parks back then, up until Dave Franzen took over the program. And Dave's another huge name. I couldn't possibly do this show without bringing up Mr. Franzen. I owe my career to him just as much as anybody. But anyways, in 1999, Mike hired me on as an overnight snowmaker. I had been actually blacklisted from the resort and deemed unhireable because, that place was my babysitter from the time I was 13 or 14 till the time I was 17 or 18, and, burned some bridges, to say the least. And, random Mike one day, he's a dear friend still. Got to know him for a minute. I was actually working on his in-laws' house, and he's like, "You want a job at Massanutten?" He's like, "I'll give you a job at Massanutten," and had a smirk on his face. He's from upstate New York, and he's like, "You can come make snow for me, 7 p.m., 7 a.m." And I was like, "Sign me up," So I started making snow that year, and it was crazy. Like, I liked it. Not many people do. And I truly can say that I really loved that job. The money was good at the time. You'd work 7/12s a few weeks in a row. It was the most money I'd ever had. You'd be tired as all hell and, useless during the day. But I loved it. And at the end of that year, when the snowmaking started slowing down, one day, one of the snowmakers was like, "Hey, we're going to teach you how to run a cat." And I was like, "Why?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're like, "Mike told us to get you in a cat and start training you." And I was like, "Sweet, yeah, sure, let's do this." Yeah. And they took me around and showed me what the buttons did, and then pretty much just got out and said, "Have at it." I remember my very first blade dive at the bottom of chair 5, and it was soft out, so it was pretty epic. Tiller was still down, so I backed over that, and like
Oh my
it was classic.
gosh.
It was classic Rook. It was like
Wow.
as green as you get, and yeah, and I kind of patched it up enough to where you couldn't really tell, but then told one of the more experienced guys to come clean up my mess. And then yeah, the next year I ended up at Massanutten Park Crew, um, working for Dave Franzen, and the only reason I got that job there was because I applied for a job at Snowshoe.
So, Joe, I've got 2 special guest questions from Dave Franzen. Big shout out to Dave for contributing. I will play the first one right now. Here we go.
Hey, Joe, Blade Dive. Joe, why don't you tell us what Massanutten's appropriate etiquette was for the PA system after hours and during snowmaking and such in the park there? It was a big deal when we got tunes in the park back in the day, and how much we enjoyed the perks that went along with that.
Oh my God. This is so funny to me because one of the beauties of this job and this career, you never really have to fully grow up, and back then we did have a PA system in the park, and oh my, like if anybody would have heard what we did with that, it would have been yanked out immediately because again, we had the J bar, and the PA system like ran up the J bar, and kids would start falling off, and we just start berating them.
over the PA.
Yes.
Oh my God, dude. Wow.
It wasn't too bad, but they'd be like getting dragged up by their ankle, and we'd be like, maybe it's time to let go. Maybe you should let go. Maybe you're getting dragged. Maybe we wouldn't swear at them, but we drop hints. But I know the story that Dave's getting at, and the stories. We were out there late one night because I did quickly become that guy that would help Day, with the night builds and stuff, and he was teaching me how to run a cat that first year that I was on park crew, and we were out shoveling something, and I was just like, "Day," I was like, I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go," and he's like, "What?" And I was like, "I gotta go," and I ran down to the bottom of the park where our shack was and the PA, and like turned on the PA, and it was kind of a little slow to warm up. And I'm just kind of bouncing around, like waiting, like mic check. Is this thing on? This thing on? And this just ripped a fart into that thing that echoed. That echoed. I don't know how far, but he's outside dying laughing, and he's like, "You just ran all the way down there to fart?" And I was like, "I did." And I think our love affair grew that night.
Oh man.
It's so
wow. Yeah.
It's so childish and stupid, but like when I don't know, man. We were always that way. Like it was always about just being serious, but just having fun, man. If you're not laughing at work, just I don't know, call it a day. Like I don't know, I don't want to be around you. But that's what he was getting at, because we did used to definitely like turn down the music and rip farts into the PA that went across our park. Sorry, Steve Showalter, it happened.
Well, I don't think there's any harm, especially when you're going up the chairlift and they're asking you to put the bar down over the PA, or even something like, hey, what you're going to want to do is you need to put the bar down, put the bar down. That's totally doable. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We do have, God, that's funny. We have another special guest question from Mr. Dave Franzen. I'm going to keep firing them at you, Joe, if you don't mind.
How about it?
Cool. I'll play the next one from Day right now. Here we go.
What's up, Joe? So many stories, man, and equally as many questions. I think one of the good stories is how I job blocked you from leaving Massanutten to go to Snowshoe. Yeah, it was kind of an asshole move, but still glad I did it. Hope you're good, man.
Snowshoe in West Virginia always stayed open a little bit longer, so I'd go over there for a couple nights at a time and go ride their park, and they stayed open about a month longer. And I liked it there, and I got to know the park crew, and was really interested in working there the following season, which would have been 2001 year, I believe. Yeah, and turned in my application and interviewed with the guy there, Brian Marshall. Because their park crew was so cool that ski school ran them. Ugh. But he called me to hire. He called me to hire me, and was like, "Hey, you're all good. Everything checked out, except one of your references didn't check out." And I was like, "Really?" And I don't remember who my other references were, but he's like, "Yeah, I called Dave Franzen, and Dave said that you're working at Massanutten this winter." And I was like, "What?" It hadn't even really been talked about, like it had never been brought up. And I was like, "Okay." Like I called Dave, and I was like, "What do you do? Like, what's going on?" He's like, "Dude, don't move to Snowshoe." He's like, "Come work for me." Then like I was kind of in a situation where I didn't know if I could work park crew. I didn't know if they were going to make me do another year of snowmaking, just to like earn my spot. You know what I mean? And he's like, "Stay here with me. I'm going to train you to run a cat." Kind of hinted at maybe moving out west and whatnot. And I was like, "Okay." But yeah, he completely job blocked me from moving to Snowshoe, and it's probably the best thing. It's probably the best thing that ever happened to me career-wise, was not going to Snowshoe and staying at Massanutten and learning from him and learning with him. And we did one season at Massanutten together, and the next year we were at Superpark 6 and working at Mountain High, and like, yeah, that's where the ride really began. So very grateful for Day, and thanks for the questions, and hopefully I get to see that dude in person again sometime soon. It's been a minute.
Yeah, huge shout out to Dave for contributing to the Blade Dive. Well, Joe, I want to switch gears really quick, and I want to go down the training rabbit hole with you. If you were going to build a training program, you, whoever was going to build a training program, but you specifically, if you were going to build one, how do you build one that doesn't necessarily break the rookie operator, or the person that wants to get trained on the winch who has been operating for a season or two? How do you build a training program that makes the employee feel valued? Does that make sense?
We really don't have anything written in stone by any means. Is to how we train people. We've been lucky in that all of our operators came up through the system. They came through hand crew. Um, I'm a firm believer in hiring within. Uh, if you have somebody that lives here, works here, may not have intentions to leave here, do what you can to keep them, especially if they're, talented. Um, the other thing that we have going on for us right now that's great is our relationship with the, I call them the fleet groomers, the trail groomers. Um, the supervisor over there, Gary Wiltrout, it's amazing, and he helps us work with our rookies and giving them time grooming trails. In return, our guys help him when he's in the bind and help finish out, before opening. And it's a really good give and take. Um, you have to trail groom. That's really all there is to it. Some people, like, I never trail groom. It shows. Like, I'm not good at it. But I think it's like crucial to lay that groundwork and learn the buttons. Snowcat's a tool. The definition of a tool is an extension of the hand. It has to be that before you can really excel at it. And I think before you can really get into parks. When I was at Mountain High, there was no push road. It was like push wing of snow out of woods to cover dirt. Um, we didn't have snow. We didn't have that luxury. It had to be done. I don't want to say right because that would be a stretch of the word, but it had to be done with very little material, very little snow. But yeah, we're still evolving with how we train, and it's a little bit different for everybody. Sometimes there's an opportunity for a day staffer to help push on the pipe. Then we can put him in the middle of a 20-foot pile, take his tiller off, work with them for an hour or two, and then hop out and let them learn the machine. And that's another thing that I feel strongly about is like not riding shotgun with somebody. First of all, I can't stand it. Why the passenger seat is less comfortable than the driver's seat is beyond me.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it makes it really hard. And then just the nervousness of like having somebody sitting over there, let them teach them what they're supposed to do, ride with them for a little while, leave, let them make mistakes, then come back, run the machine again now that they've sat in the cockpit and show them again. Then they're usually like, oh, okay, that's what I was doing wrong. And I was fortunate enough to get trained later, not just by day, but then, the next year that summer I was at Mount Hood. After the year at Mountain High, and then the winter after that, I was at June Mountain, and I learned so much from Eric Rosenwald. Like, he saw potential in me, luckily, and he taught me a ton of stuff, like just some little tidbits of information that I hadn't gotten. But I don't know. I might be jumping ahead.
No. I think you're bringing up something great, and maybe I'll spin off of it and ask you this. Just in looking either within the hiring pool internally or externally, wherever your focus is it beneficial for somebody to go and operate equipment on Alpine? I'm dubbing them Alpine because I'm tired of saying multiple different names. Or is it more of an inconvenience for, say, the day crew individual to go over to Alpine because you're then making that manager develop their skill set when they started out with the terrain park crew? Does that make sense? That might be a lot to unpack. I don't know. You let me know if it is, but
Well, again, I hate to keep, referring to our unique situation here at the resort where it's so small. I mean, we're not tiny, but like it's such a small operation as far as like, we have night skiing, so everybody's out there from 10 p.m. until 8 or 9 a.m., all trying to achieve the same thing. And so far, it's worked out to where it happens. So there's a lot of give and take there. And just because like they're out grooming trails doesn't mean they're in a trail cat. They could be in a park cat doing that, and it could be our guys training them. It's just nice of Gary to let us screw up his trails. You know, we put out so much snow. Like I'm not even going to fudge the numbers. I don't know the accurate numbers of GPM and all that. But we have a HKD gun every 50 feet, 75 feet, sometimes down both sides of the trails. And when when it's cold out, it's a struggle to get the hill put back together. So it's definitely a really wonderful team effort. Not I'm sitting here telling the stories. I'm not out there as much anymore. It's my guys and the fleet guys that make it happen. But it takes everybody working together to pull it off. And I feel like we have kind of hit a stride with that where I don't know, it's weird, man. Everybody's working together. It's really weird because that hasn't been the case, throughout my career.
well, yeah, I think what you're bringing up the cohesiveness of what it means to have two different, and they're different, but
Yes.
very similar departments. You've got somebody that's responsible, or a crew of people that's responsible for maintaining the remainder of the footprint of acreage that has nothing to do with terrain parks. But when you're hiring internally or when you're hiring externally, how do we keep, maybe we'll spin it this way, how do you keep those people? Right? Some managers would probably go, oh, fuck, I'm so mad right now. This person left. I've taken all the time to train them. They're going to go elsewhere. And now I've got to figure out who my next employee is going to be. But in the industry, there is an ever revolving door of people who are coming and going and then maybe even coming back, boomeranging back to the industry. But I feel like that's okay. Like you shouldn't be mad at somebody for leaving the industry or leaving the department. You've given them some skill sets to go. But how do you keep your crew coming back every year? How do you keep that stoke level alive with your team so that they want to come back?
I've been very lucky in that sense. I don't know. I can't say enough good things about the guys that I have working for me right now. And it's tough. I can't get into the nuts and bolts about wages, but it's obviously you want to compensate people when you feel they deserve and pay them what they deserve. And unfortunately, that's not always up to me. But I do try. But beyond just wages, it's just I try to get them involved in cool things. Um, the last Superpark we went to, I took several people that had never been before. As myself, Keenan Gillen, he's been here longer than me and been to just as many Superparks, by the way. It was him and I, and then we took Jude and Rogan with us, and I think like that probably bought me another 2 years with them. I don't know about beyond that, but it's really difficult to keep people here, to retain them. It's hard, especially when kind of the status quo was to hire the rock star from some other resort and maybe or maybe not pay him more. And then that makes your guys that have been dedicated not so motivated to stick around, because they're like, well, if you're just going to replace me with whoever from wherever, like, why should I stay? And, that's honestly like kind of one of the mottos that was part of this industry before, was you have to move around to move up. And I'm a product of that. This is my 8th resort. If you really wanted to move up, you had to hit the road. And it's unfortunate that there's no way to convince people that you're working with that it's worth investing in so and so to keep them happy and to keep them here. I feel it's gotten a shit ton better, but I don't think it's quite there yet. Like where it really needs to be. Yeah, without saying too much, it has gotten a lot better, and we have a really forward-thinking manager here that helps out a lot.
Yeah, and you bring up a whole bunch of other good points too. The industry, I think, still has a long way to go with just everything centered around wages and what it looks like to be able to provide sustainable lifestyles for people and family. That's my 2 cents. But as resorts, as you mentioned, have gotten better about, or the industry as a whole has gotten better about treating people as people, I think people have gotten better at standing up for themselves and going, hey, this is what I need. But I wanted to know too. Like, I wanted to know what your take on all that was. You're a key player in the game. You've got some really big thoughts to share, and I've always loved catching up with what you've got to say on current trends and where things are headed and where they can go. It's also important to take the job seriously, but also have fun too. Yeah.
It is, and I do want to go back a little bit when I said, if you're not having fun, go home. Like, also, if you're not taking your shit seriously, go home. Like, there's a common ground, there's a middle ground there where, like, if you're not having fun doing it anymore, I don't know what to tell you. But we do take it very seriously. Like, I don't want that to be misconstrued, or whatever that word is. But no, I mean, we do take it very seriously. But you've got to still laugh and have a chuckle at yourself most of the time, or at the situation you're in. But we do take it extremely seriously, and that's why we get to do really fun stuff. With the snowboarder shoots and the other events we're lucky enough to do. And that's another way to keep. Never mind, I'm talking in circles. I was going to say, there's another way to keep those kids engaged and wanting to stick around. I say kids, they're mid-20s, 30s. But it helps a lot to get them involved in really cool events and give them the opportunity to think and design and do more than just lay corduroy,
Yeah. Well, I think that if we just looked at the job as an archaic thing, maybe some people are passionate about that. So don't get me wrong there. If you just like operating the machine and you don't want to be involved any further than that, but you're good at what you do, that's fantastic. Let's highlight that. But you have never really caught me as somebody, Joe, that is literally pounding things into people's head. I feel like you take a wide lens look at the room on different skill sets and who can do what in the crew.
When I got here, there were a lot of guys running snowcats that were had potential but very untrained. I feel like before I was here, the person running, because I got hired at Seven Springs to be just a cat operator, nothing more. There was a grooming supervisor, there was a terrain park manager. The grooming supervisor was very stuck in his way of doing things, and his way of doing things was he did everything. So these guys that I was working with, they didn't know how to rebuild a jump takeoff. And I'm not talking about a 20-foot, cheese wedge. I'm talking about, just a small park jump. Like, yeah, we've never done it before. We've never done it before. And I'm like, why? How have you not done it? You've been here 4 years, So in that situation, I did teach them the way to do it. And I was like, this is how you do it, unless you find a better way, and then you prove to me it's better. So in that kind of scenario, I would kind of put my foot down and say, this is how you do it. But I've always been like, if you can do it better than me, you just keep on doing it your way. I'm not going to say a thing. And I think you're speaking of like Park City. When I moved there, when Coop was nice enough to give me that job at Park City, when I got there, I realized the talent that was there. And I was like, I'm not going to tell these guys what to do. Like, they know what to do. You, Gabe Westberg, Chris Ingham, Alex Falkenstein. Like, what am I going to tell you guys? Like, you don't already know. So it was more just, try to be support. And like you said, just see what I can add and, kind of have the 30,000-foot view of the department more than micromanaging highly skilled people. It's a waste of time,
I do want to jump into the push road question of the day. That's something I don't want to miss, so I will roll the intro for you now, and we will jump into it.
The push road question of the day.
I love the push road question of the day. It's a good way for listeners to contribute. We've made it even easier now. We're letting folks know who we're talking to, and we're doing that via Instagram stories. So look for that to happen, that to drop Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Joe, Keenan Gillen has your push road question today, Joe. And Keenan asks, Joe, snowcat blade screens or snow screens? They seem to break on you more than anyone I know. If you could, please elaborate on those experiences and their structural integrity.
All right. I think we're finishing up the launch. That's another thing we've been lucky to do. We hosted the launch at Seven Springs. And I was winching, and the only thing I had to pick off of was like an old, like BR 400, I think. And like a dipshit, I ran the loop over the top of the blade and hooked to that. And and Keenan was there. Like I was in a Sherpa, and Keenan was there watching, and it was like the end of, like, we'd been there for 24 hours, 25 hours, and it was like the last thing to do. And you start getting punch drunk at that point, and like I tensioned up at one point. The blade, the top of the blade, just went ka-thunk, just snapped completely.
Oh,
well, wait. I wish he was here
God.
to correct me, because I think it bent a little bit first, and it was like, I think it'll be okay. And then, like, 5 seconds later, it just snapped off as fast as you could possibly, like, make something break off. And we were both, like, I could see him just keeled over laughing in his cat, and, like, I was the same way. We were laughing so hard, which is terrible. You kids, you should not laugh at broken machinery. But it was a stupid move on my part, and I should have gone under the blade. But for whatever, I forget what happened. Like, whatever reason, I ran it over the top, and that happened. And again, it was like a dump cat. It was like a utility cat. It wasn't the end of the world by any means. But then I did another one just like about a month ago. I snapped one off. I was moving rail features with a normal snowcat 400 blade, not the Park Pro blade. And I had a propane tank on there that took a bounce and sheared her right off. So yeah.
Oh man.
That's
Oh,
2 for me, and I've never seen it happen to anybody else.
that's unreal.
Thank you, Keenan. I had no idea you were chiming in on this.
Yeah, huge shout out to Keaton for contributing. Got to keep some of them a
Yeah.
surprise. Yeah.
Oh no, please! I love it. Keep them coming. It's great.
Cool. Well, I do want to jump back into you and the career a little bit. So I'd be curious to know Mountain High, your adventure with Day going there. How did that come to fruition?
Coming up on the 2001-2002 season, he got an opportunity to manage the park at Mountain High in Southern California. And he took the job and he wanted me to go with him. And, assistant terrain park manager type role there. And it honestly took some convincing on his part. I wasn't 100% sold on the idea. But once again, like, he made the right choice for me. And, like, he didn't make me go, but he sold it really hard and, like, told me I was stupid not to. And again, he was right. So yeah, 22 years old, packed up all my stuff, drove my 1988 Mitsubishi Mighty Max all the way across the country with a map. There was no such thing as Google Maps at the time. It was a paper map.
Well, that's such a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was way scarier then.
Well, of course, man, because it's like, well, there might be a gas station here. I can't Google that.
Oh yeah.
You know?
But yeah, I made the move, lived with him for a minute, once I got out there. And there was actually like 5 or 6 of us that ended up going from Massanutten and all working park crew. But yeah, we moved to Wrightwood, met a lot of cool people there, and that was my first experience of the West Coast. And all I kept saying is, when's it gonna snow? When's it gonna snow? When's it gonna snow? Because I didn't do any research. I didn't realize that it really doesn't snow in Southern California, except for that crazy, once every 5-ish years, you get that rogue winter. That's insane. But yeah, very eye-opening, very cool, like amazing move. Met a lot of really cool people that I'm still in touch with. But yeah, that's kind of how that went down.
So you spent minimal hours from us talking earlier in a machine on the East Coast. How in the world did you get the opportunity to, was it Mountain High that you jumped into a snowcat and they were kind of just saying, here you go, here are the keys?
When we got there, the guys that were building were not too happy with the new program that Mr. Franzen and myself brought to the table, and they quit. So we lost Shane Smart, who was an incredible builder, in my opinion. And then I can't remember the other guy's name, but yeah, they quit one day. And Day was like, hey, here's your time to shine. And I literally got put in the snowcat with about probably 12 to 15 hours of experience, behind the sticks at that point. And was told to go build and groom parks. And it was pretty weird, but like right out of the gate, like they were seriously like some of the best parks I've ever seen in my life. And by that I mean it was atrocious. It was it was so bad. I was clueless, and Day was coming out there. He had to manage the department, so he couldn't stay all night. But he'd come out and work with me for a few hours, and and try to put this place back together because it's a very high traffic resort. Southern California, it's stuff's beat up, especially with night skiing. It's extremely beat up, and I was clueless. It was very intimidating times, and one thing that I'm grateful for is that when Shane quit, he didn't leave the resort. He went to fleet grooming, and he'd see me struggling on something, and he'd come over and be like, "Hey, man, let me show you how to do that." Because whatever his problem was with the company wasn't with me personally. So he'd hop in and help me out, and get me out of some binds, and we ended up hiring on some more experienced guys. I think they were from a resort called Bear Valley or something down there, or I forget. Yeah, Charlie Treywake and this guy Nick. We brought them on board, and they taught me a lot as well. Because I was really really bad at it. Like I said, I operated a lawnmower before then, before a snowcat. So this was all completely new to me. But it worked itself out, like everything. Thank God, we had two brand new 275 terrain masters, and all I can say is that poor snowcat. That one I ran. Oh my.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, we're
Yeah.
laughing about it, and it's we get it. It's funny now looking back on it, but that had to have been huge. Having Shane take an interest in your struggles.
Yeah, and you say huge, but like we all know, the hardest thing to build is a beginner jump. And
Mm,
that's one of the things Shane saw me struggling with was like, 4 foot tall pile of snow, like 12 feet long, 15 feet long. And, it's the hardest thing to build still to this day, in my opinion.
yeah, I
Um,
agree.
they're not easy. And for whatever reason, we throw the rookies at them. And I think that should be something we shy away from, in the future. Like, I don't know what to do with the rookies, but definitely not have them rebuild, first timer jumps. Um, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna pivot here and go down. I mean, you can take it however far you want to go down the wormhole here, but resort park poles. I mean, and I'm bringing this up because you have been so many different places. My curiosity with those things has always been how valuable they are, or if they're valuable at all. I always liked having fun with them, attempting to vote like 12 different times, just saying. But what is your take on those?
I mean, I love them when we're winning. Um, obviously, yeah, I don't know. Like, I've got mixed emotions on them. Like we went back and forth with like Corinthia for several years, and that was really fun because like at one point Dave Franzen was up there, and I'm at Seven Springs, and we're calling each other, busting each other's balls, like for fun. Like a lot of the kids that start the social media crap don't realize that we're really all friends behind the scenes, like most of us
Mm,
are. And they have their little rivalries and stuff on Instagram or whatnot, but we're like we talk. Like one of our biggest rivals really recently was Pat Morgan up at when he was a big boulder, and we were friends. You know, on the ground level, between the kids, they like to argue and bicker, but we really didn't care that much. But as far as the polls go, like they were nice. Like I don't know, they took a weird turn at the end when I don't want to like say anything bad about Snowpark Technologies, but they got involved with the polling and started incorporating data, which boils down to like feature counts and feature sizing and number of parks, labor hours, and all this stuff got thrown into the mix, and it almost made it confusing. Um, which I mean, I'll be totally honest. I used to bitch about it before because I felt like it was a popularity contest. It was who could get the most votes, and it had nothing to do with what was truly out there. It was who was cooler that year. And then they started incorporating the data, which I think their intentions were right, but there was a year where we won the popular vote by a large margin because that was we were allowed to see that. we were allowed to see it in real time. But when the data part of it came in, like, we ended up in like 5th or 6th place on the East Coast. And I don't feel that that's where we belong. So I don't know. Like I said, it's a love-hate with it. Like, when you're winning, it's awesome. When you're not winning, it's like people start questioning you and your ability to do your job, and you have to kind of try to explain it away, but sometimes it falls on deaf ears.
Excuse me. I remember when Park City won, and they got that #1 ranking because Buttermilk had held that spot for so long, and maybe that's why I wanted to talk about it with you as well, because that effort, and you were a part of that effort in producing that with the team there that we were all a part of. That effort seemed real. There was so much media that was coming out of there. It just seemed organic. There was a different era. There's a lot to really unpack there as I just kind of ramble myself. But do you remember that time? And I mean, what was that experience like? I mean, that's what I think it's one thing to experience the Park Pole as a voter who isn't on a crew, but they were fun to talk about. I mean, if you didn't want to participate, it was fun to banter.
Yeah, I kind of miss it. It was a fun thing to talk about, and the last one was pretty fun with the Q codes and stuff. Definitely had some fun with those. But I took our logo and I took Big Boulder's logo and put our Q code in the middle of it and sent it to. And like, I never put it out to the public, but I sent it to Pat, and I'm like, check this out. So it automatically links you to vote for Seven Springs. And this is Pat, Pat Morgan over at Boulder. It was a pretty funny thing for all of us to chuckle about, but I never made it, produced it. But it just shows what you could do. The Park City thing was huge. Like, I know, didn't they go 1-1?
I think.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Don't quote me on that one. Nobody roast me. We'll just call Cooper.
Yeah.
Call Cooper really quick and ask him. But forever it was Buttermilk, as I mentioned earlier. Like, it was always Buttermilk, and then I think Mammoth maybe had a spot for a second, and then Park City just boom out of nowhere grabbed it. And I think that's the power that I'm talking about of influencing things through the media.
Yeah, I mean, Park City was huge. The I Ride Park City brand was, I think, a complete game changer. Yeah, I mean, what Mangan did, and then Coop, obviously took it to the next level, was something to be very proud of, as far as I'm concerned. That was amazing. And then the amount of talent, the pro team. It was such a cool resort, man, until it wasn't. But I can't say that, they're kind of making a comeback. You can tell that they're feeling the Woodward facility kind of nipping at them and changing their ideals a bit. And best of luck to them.
Speaking of luck, I feel like this is a lucky dude. He's got a dog that poops in buckets, too. Jeremy Cooper's your next special guest question.
All right.
I'll play it now. Here we go.
Hey, Joe, it's Coop. Hey, buddy. We've gotten to do a lot of fun projects together over the years, and one in particular that you kind of spearheaded, and I was just kind of hanging off to the side helping you push the bulk snow for, but was the Cathedral Gap for the grenade chute. And during that build, we got to learn about a certain culture from a place called Newfoundland. Could you elaborate on the Newfie culture? And also, could you tell us a little about what was scarier when Mike Tobia fell, basically busted his back up? Was that scarier than when the patrol came and the patroller went off of the takeoff straight to, 15, 20 feet to flat with the toboggan? And then they had to send 2 patrollers out, one for Mike Tobia and one for the patroller. What was scarier between those two, the patroller or Mike Tobia's fall? Thanks, Joe. Great talking to you. Bye.
Well, you didn't talk to me, stupid. You talked to a microphone.
Oh man. Oh,
You
Cooper.
dummy.
Oh man. Well, what do you think, dude? How you weighing in?
Yeah, good talking to you too. Well, I'm gonna plead the fifth on the Newfie remarks, because that was just a very funny moment in time, back there doing those bills with Coop. And yeah, he brings up the Mytopia thing that, you know, I was obsessed with, like, building channel gaps, and I tried to build like a full, like, X up, like 2 takeoffs, 2 landings type deal there at the bottom of South Park at Mammoth. I think it was bottom of South Park. I can't remember, but you know, I got the bright idea to do this in like early June, you know. So it was like falling apart faster than I could build it, and it worked out okay. Like Danny Cass wrote it well, but Mike ended up getting pretty seriously hurt. He you know, he landed in the channel, and then yeah, patrol came down to rescue him, as I make air quotes, and they just rode off the back of his takeoff and plummeted to flat, and I think they broke their back too. Um, so yeah, but a little funny moment in history. That was my last day working at Mammoth. That was the very last day I worked there.
Crazy. But you were at June and Mammoth. You spent time pushing for projects or pushing for parks or building at both resorts.
So what happened? What happened was, like, you know, I was close with Orrin and Rosie, you know, at the time when I started at June. So when June always wrapped up 420. We did like the grenade games thing, and then I was unemployed. Uh, so I talked to Orrin about going over and finishing out the year at Mammoth, and he was like, "Absolutely!" Like, no. I feel bad because I think the first year he let Pete Colombo go so I could go over there. I'm not 100% sure on that story, but I ended up getting a spot over at Mammoth, and it's funny. I wanted to talk about this. I got I got immediately thrown into late season photo shoots over at Mammoth, and I was like, hell yeah, you know, because like pushing snow during the day wasn't a thing you got to do, kind of like snowboarding during the day back when I was a kid. But he's like, yeah, I want you on daylight. We've got these shoots coming up. I want you to work with Gerstner, you know, working on this and working on that. And I was like, it was heaven to me. Like, you know, Orrin's like, yeah, we got this company coming. They're called like Mac Dog. You want to build a jump for them? And and I'm like, absolutely, I do. You know, and you know, the very first thing I built over there was a Vans 2 jump line, and you know, it was just Gerstner and I out there, and I'd met Gerstner at Superpark 6, and you know, the team was Eric Rosenwald, Mike Gerstner, and Chris Bronze was the Mammoth June team that year, but hadn't spent a lot of time with Mikey. And next thing I know, it's just him and I out there. And one day after I retire, I'll tell the story about that first meeting, but it was pretty interesting. Um, I love Mikey to death. And one of the reasons was like, he's the guy. He is Mammoth Mountain from 1998 until current date that we're building together, or whatever year he started. I don't know. I think he started at Summit, whatever. But he's the guy. And we get these tables stacked, and he's like, yeah, why don't you go up there and build takeoffs on those? And I was just like, you know, never did I think that he'd be such a humble dude to be like, go do that, rookie. You know, at that point, I'm a glorified like 3rd-year rookie at best, and he's just like, yeah, go build those takeoffs. Like, I hear you're pretty good at it. And I was just like, I couldn't get that cat up the hill fast enough. Like, I was so over the top eager, like, yes, you know. And like, he even helped me farm snow and whatever. And like, he just let me do it. And I was dumbfounded. Like, I could not believe it.
Crazy. Well, you moved over to June at some point in time, whether that was meeting Rosie or how all that unfolded. I'd want to know more there too. How'd that romance go?
Yeah, I mean, I probably should have started this off with, like, I described my career as, like, I don't know if you've ever seen Forrest Gump, but it's this blockbuster hit from the mid 90s. And, you know, it kind of starts out with, like, day friends and tell me what I was going to do and what I wasn't going to do. And I was just like, okay. And, you know, and,
best Forrest Gump impressions. What you got? Yeah.
and then, you know, we ended up at Mountain High, and for whatever reason, that year, that was the year of Superpark 6, the Cutters Cup. Yeah, the Cutters Cup, the first year of park building competition. And you know, that's where I met Eric Rosenwald was there. And that's when we started talking shop about me going and working at June Mountain the following year. So that's how that whole thing started.
Was that him taking an interest in the C box and going, hey, what's that? How'd that happen?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly don't remember how it truly started. Like, after that, we moved up to Mount Hood. Day and I again, you know, Day got the job running the public park. You know, him and I road tripped up from Wrightwood together, like 14 hours one way. Drove up, interviewed with Steve Cruz and whoever, got hired, stayed the night, drove back 14 hours, and left Mountain High, which actually pissed off those guys a lot because they were pissed that they sent us to Superpark and then we just bailed on them. Understandably, in hindsight. Yeah, I mean, you know, at the time, I didn't, you know, I knew nothing about the business. I was a snowmaker that got thrown in a snowcat, that got thrown in a truck and, you know, driven cross country. So I was very naive to what was, you know, the circumstances and whatever. But we were at Hood, and it just so happened that Rosenwald got a job building a feature for MacDog at Meadows. So Rosenwald was up there for like a month, working with Josh King, who's a name I can't believe hasn't been mentioned on the show before. But they were doing this feature for MacDog, and he ended up staying with us. So we got to know Rosie pretty well. And that's, you know, I started cheating on Day with Eric at first, and it was this big secret, you know. We were hiding in dark rooms, and then we came out, you know, and, you know, I made it clear today that, like, I was extremely interested in going to work at June Mountain. I was just intrigued by Mammoth and June. And like I said earlier, like, I wanted to move somewhere where there was snow. I wanted to ride bigger mountains, and Mountain High wasn't it. It was just an East Coast mountain outside of LA for the most part. And I did just say LA. But yeah, that's kind of how that came about. And, you know, we talked, and actually Orrin ended up coming up and staying. I don't think he stayed with us, but we ended up having dinner with Orrin a few times, who had taken over the program at Mammoth. He was up there looking at the very first Zog 18-foot pipe cutter. I believe that they had the demo at Hood for the original Zog Super Pipe, and then eventually, you know, the extension for the Super Duper Pipe. And so we all hung out, like the four of us hung out, and as it ended up, like, I went and worked for Rosenwald at June, and Day went and worked for Orrin at Mammoth. And I think it was Brandon Dodds that kind of picks up that story, because Day ended up leaving Mammoth early that first year to go up to Heavenly. So yeah, that's kind of the precursor to Dodds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do have another special guest question. As I promised, they're riddled all throughout this episode. And it is from Mr. Peter Colombo. So I will play it now. Here we go.
Aloha, Blade Dive.
It's Peter Colombo with a special guest question for a man that was extremely influential in my career, and there's no way that I would have ever got where I got to without his help and guidance. The one and only Mr. Joe Genovese. Joe, two-part question. Part one, what was your funniest memory of 323 looping? And part two, what was your biggest personal takeaway from the time that you were at June Mountain? Love you guys. See ya.
Oh boy. Oh, Peter. Yeah, Peter's I stole him from Mammoth. The first year it was up to me to find cat operators over at June, and Pete was at the top of my list. He's such a great guy. And we ended up being roommates at 323 Lupin. And I can't really pinpoint the funniest moment from 323 Lupin, but I'll tell a personal one between Pete and I. That I don't know. He might be the only person that even laughs at this, but I don't care at this moment. We played a lot of Mario Kart 64. All right,
Cool.
head to head battle mode, block fort. For those of you that are in the know, and we would play till it was like 76-74. Like, we play 150 rounds of this,
Oh.
on a random night, and just it would get so heated because like I was good at it when we started, and he sucked, so I used to just mop the floor with him. But he caught up, and we got to the point where that was our evening. Like, it was neck and neck. The one day, I don't know if we got in a fight about it. I might have thrown a controller. I can't remember. But like the next day, I got up before Pete, and like whatever, I don't know. Like I had a banana for breakfast, and Pete was still asleep in bed, and I finished I finished the banana, and I set the peel up perfectly, like right outside his bedroom door in the little banana pyramid, just like Mario Kart, And Pete wakes up, and he comes out all, shirtless and golden bronze colored, like Pete Colombo, scratching his head, and he just looks down, and he looks up at me, and he's like, "Did you just try to nanner me?" And I was like, "Yes, I did."
The Mario Kart days. Wow.
But
wow.
So many funny stories from that place too. He brought up the bowling alley next door, and that's what I nicknamed it. He mentioned it on his blade dive, and it just looked like somebody took a shed that you bought from like Lowe's and glued like 19 of them together and called it a house. And one day we were speculating about what's actually inside there, and I was like, it could be a bowling alley. And we all had a good laugh. And then I think Erath was there at the time, because at one point Andrew Erath lived downstairs from us as well. We had a good chuckle, and that's just what we called it from then on, was the bowling alley. So 323 Lupin. Awesome question. What was part two? Biggest takeaway from June Mountain?
Yep, biggest takeaway from working at June Mountain.
Oh, geez. Honestly, like the biggest takeaway from there was making do without having much, probably. We didn't have much of a rail budget. We didn't have really nice things. We had nice snowcats for the time. But honestly, I think the biggest takeaway there was like learning to get it done with minimal resources. And, after I left and Coop took over, like he did a way better job at that with his junkyard diving and, the propane tanks and satellite dishes and stuff. But to me, I think that was the biggest thing, was like learning to make it happen with very little. I used to have to ask to buy, 10 cutoff wheels for a grinder. And sometimes they said no. It was a bit of a struggle for sure in that aspect. But yeah, that's it. But thank you so much, Pete. I miss you. He got to come out and work with us at Seven Springs. Such a good dude.
Yes, such a good dude. I was stoked to have Pete on the Blade Dive. Pete, thanks for contributing, man, to Joe's episode. I want to pivot, and you just rattled off a whole bunch of awesome experiences that you've had with people you've worked with on the job, off the job, but I've always looked at operations teams, whether it's terrain park specific or not, is there's two major folds within the department, and one of them is that you're providing a product or an experience for the guest, and then two, you're always wanting to, as the manager, provide the experience for your employees. It's almost as if you're like leveling up in Mario Kart, you know? I want maybe your 2 cents on that. How do you provide both of those and excel at them?
It is a tough one, and because granted, you want to keep your staff stimulated. That the word stimulated, it can sound creepy, but it's not.
Good way to put that.
It's more mentally. It's yeah. It's you've got to sit down through orientation with your guys, and you've got a bunch of rookies. At least we do. Our department's like 31, 33 people typically every year. And you sit down in this room full of people, which hopefully they're familiar faces. They're not always. They're sometimes half and half, noobs and experienced guys. And you guys, you start kind of picking out their qualities immediately. And then you have to give people tasks that you think will stimulate them, that they're probably good at. Not to like stereotype or do any sort of that type of thing, but you can pretty much look at a person and be like, that guy will be good at the shop. That guy will be good running a grinder. That guy will be good painting. That guy will be good, running hand crew. This guy used to work at a sign shop for his dad. He'll be good for, signage, and, we have an in-house sign shop. He'll be great working with Johnny down there and like doing all our liability stuff and branding the rails, because that's the same, vinyl material printed. But just finding things people are good at and trying to get them in a place where when they come to work, it doesn't just feel like running on a treadmill. Some people just want to be on snow. Good. Have at it, man. But you're going to be there when it's sunny and 40, and you're also going to be there when it's 4 degrees and, we have 700 snowmaking guns running. So you got to take the good with the bad. But I think just finding like where people fit in and where they want to be, and obviously it can't be they decide what they feel like doing that day. And then I say that like you try to stereotype people and say this person's gonna be good at that, this person's gonna be good at this. Like, one of my cat operators that's great. I never would have thought he was a day crew supervisor. I never would have thought Rogan was going to be like this super good cat operator. And he absolutely proved me wrong. When he told me he wanted to be in a cat, I was like, sure, if you say so. Tyler Pence has been here longer than me, and he came and went and came back, and brilliant young builder. I think he's a 3rd or 4th year operator, and thank God I've got these kids here. I say kids again, like they're not kids, they're men, but they kick ass.
Dude, that's awesome. Well, and I think along the lines of employee experience and being able to cater to that, you got to know your crew. You got to know your people. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing, but maybe just real quick, the guest experience and your how you're contributing now in your current role.
Yeah, and the guest experience, again, you did ask about my role at Seven Springs now. Like, I do have the privilege of hiring somebody to run our marketing and social media for Terrain Park specifically. And, the job titles change throughout the years as far as like social media manager, filmer, videographer, whatever. But I do still work closely with them, and that whole sense of like remaining stimulated with your job. It's something different that I've never thought about before or had to think about. And now all of a sudden it's like, hey, we have COVID restrictions. How are we going to have events this year? I get more out of it than, like, if I were to somehow build the X Games or a World Cup. Like, I just like the everyday person, all inclusive, pay $5 and get a T-shirt type event.
Yeah, I mean it's tangible. People have something that they can walk away with. It's a better experience.
Well, and I think it gets me back to just those wintergreen days where, like, the slightest little thing you did made a difference, and, like, I just like making a kid's day with, like, some silly, like, my favorite event that we do is called the Battle of Little Big Air, and it's a big air contest on a little jump, and that's all there is to it. Like, my favorite thing we do.
That's rad. Speaking of things that you do, or maybe you're given, rather.
Uh-oh.
No. This one is definitely not geared towards anything that you can't handle. You've done a lot. We've covered a bunch, but there have been, just as you've discussed, things that you've taken away from those experiences. And maybe it was profound. Maybe it was something that somebody said to you. So is there any advice that you've ever been given in your career that you just were over the moon stoked to receive?
Oh, geez, we're getting deep, Parker. So Jeff Flood's been brought up a lot on this show, which I had the privilege of working with him for one summer up at Hood in 2002. And that was like a funny year up there because, like, everybody was there. And by that, I mean, like, Jake Engel was working there. Corley was working there. Josh King. They were like the big kids in town. They'd been there a couple years. And I didn't know who they were. We just came up from Mountain High, riding that Superpark high. And, I'm in a cat there, grooming and building public park. And I used to get so pissed at those guys when I didn't get a cat at 4:00 in the morning. And I'd throw little temper tantrums, But, those guys are out grooming the camps. They're doing Windells and High Cascade and Camp of Champions and Camp Revolutions. And I'm like, I need to groom public park, And I'd throw my little bitch fits, and, I didn't understand the dynamic up there at all on the glacier. And Flutto was like, one day he was like, you ever heard of the phrase, big fish, small pond, and small fish, big pond? And I was like, no. What are you talking about, old man? He's like, well, you came from a small pond where you were the big fish, and, now you're the small fish in a big pond. And he basically said, fucking suck it up and deal with it. And I was like, okay, it kind of resonated. But that's just like, really just acknowledge who you are and where you are, and really evaluate your importance in the moment. That's all I could really take from that as far as advice. But it was great to know the man. Everybody tells their stories about him, and he definitely taught me, like, the value of having those pants that you can unzip and they turn into shorts. Because it got hot up in that bitch.
Well, I mean, I think that's pretty solid advice on both fronts. Staying cool and keeping yourself in check, Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I want to stay on the deep blade dive topics. And this one's something that I really want to discuss with you because I know you got a weigh in, but how do you think we get this next generation excited about snow sports? How do you think that happens?
Coop brought up a pretty, extremely important point about the industry itself, and in that I think he said 83% of people that go skiing for the first time don't ever do it again. That's a huge hurdle for the industry, is usership, getting people out there doing it. It's a generational thing. It's usually passed down from generation to generation. most people enjoy skiing because their parents did it and they forced them to do it as kids, and then it becomes like a sentimental thing, or maybe you truly just love it. But the one and dones, that's a huge issue for us. It's a huge hurdle. And what can we do to make the experience better? There's a lot of things in the way for the industry. It's expensive. It's cold. You stand in line. The infrastructure is poorly done. Like it's from the time you get out of your car and take a shuttle down to the rental shop and blah blah blah. I think we need to make it easier to get from your house to the slopes comfortably. How that works, I don't know if it's like an Uber program for skiing. If you go just like get fitted for your boots somewhere else where it's warm and you didn't already stand in line, and I don't know. There's a lot of things we can do, I think, to streamline the experience of skiing for the first time. It doesn't have to be as archaic as it was when we did it for the first time. And I just don't see it happening, except for, some super uber rich people. So on that aspect, as far as, getting people involved in the sport, I see a lot of room for improvement, but I think we're also still a long ways away from it being implemented. Getting people involved in working here, well, I mean, or working in the industry, we're almost having the same conversation at that point, because the way I was able to afford to ski growing up, and a lot of people were able to afford to ski growing up, was getting a job at the resort and getting that free pass, and
Oh yeah.
getting the inn with their buddies on some cheaper gear, and like not having to pay out the ass, and like getting to the point where they can just park in a parking lot and strap in and ski down a trail. Um, that's like usually the resort's biggest selling point is the perks, and we deal with that here. The problem is a lot of the people around here, we're in Western Pennsylvania. Um, you know, we to quote Erath, when Erath was here, I got to work with Erath again too, which was awesome. He came out like once or twice, I can't remember, to help finish our pipe, and I said something to us about being on the East Coast, and he's just like, dude, I've been to the East Coast before, and this isn't it. You guys are in the Midwest.
Mm.
Which is just freaking funny. Uh, but like people around here don't care about going skiing. Like we very few anyway. Anyways, it's hard to like, I don't know, different world, different area, different everything, like different landscape, different economies, different interests, and it's not skiing. You'd be better off like selling them on free tubing, or sporting clays rounds. No disrespect to the area, but that's just the truth. Like they don't care about the perks. But for us, little go-getter snowboarder rats, like, wait, if I work in the rental shop 2 nights a week, I can ski for free. Like that meant a shit ton to us.
Mm. Well, I'll go even deeper. If you could do one thing today that could make a small dent in the overall issue, what would it be? What would you do?
Who was just on on your show recently that was talking about the municipal?
Steve Petrie. Yeah.
Petrie, yeah, Petrie was talking about how they bought rails from him, and like, just set up a little jib park, uh, in a public park scenario, if I remember correctly. I just think there needs to be more like that. The first few times not the when I couldn't afford a lift ticket, I'd just go down to the park when we actually got natural snow, um, and build a little kicker and just hit it all day long. Um, but just I don't know. I think the sport's so married, like snowboarding in general. like, I love the free skiing thing. I love skiers. I love anybody that uses our facilities and, skiing, snowboarding, it's all the same to me. I just wish snowboarding was more accessible. We live in a skier's world, you know. There's no two ways about that. There's more and more people coming up in the industry, climbing their way to the top that are snowboarders. It's happening more and more. You know, Joel's a prime example. Day's a prime example. You know, Elia, Jeremy Cooper. Well, Jeremy's a skier, but whatever. We'll give him a break. He does snowboard now. Um, but more and more snowboarders are getting their way in. Ken Gator. They're all doing great things, but it's still a skier's world, and it's not easy to get into at all. For me, like I said, it was buying a $75 used snowboard and then a $190 night pass. Or like the first year I rode, I only went twice, and it was Monday Night Madness at Massanutten, and I got a $10 lift ticket and a $10 rental. So for $20, I went from 4 to 10. Like that's unheard of, and it's supply and demand. They can hike their rates because people pay it. No default to them. That's business. But it's just very hard to attain. The sport's just not easy. It's like trying to become a great golfer. It's just, yeah, it's very difficult to get into and afford. But that's why I like when Peachy was saying that more and more of these townships, whatever, are buying rail packages and just putting them out and like let the kids play with them and set them up and hand dig them and learn how to front board slide.
Yes, everybody needs more front boards in their lives. I would agree with that. I love the front side board slide. I've got another special guest question for you, Joe. As I promised, Joel Rarico. I'll play it for you now.
Hey, Joe G, this is Joel. Have a two-part question for you. What is the best rental car to get when visiting Hood? And how far of a hike up the access road to Meadows is it whenever that car doesn't make it up? See you, man.
I tried to talk Timmy into getting a Subaru Outback. We're going to Mount Hood in May. Timmy's trying to convince me to get a convertible, like Camaro or something stupid like that. And we had to meet in the middle on a Sebring. Or it was a Lincoln or something. I can't remember what it was, but Timmy was convinced we could fit all of us and all our gear in a 2-door convertible, and like how sick it would be if we rolled to Superpark in this thing. And yeah, it ended up being, I think one of my very first Instagram posts is actually a picture of us walking the Superpark 18 because it snowed 4 inches and we couldn't even get there. Like the car's off the side of the road, like we're hiking up the road. And thank God Timmy was with me, because if it was me and he was somewhere else laughing at me, it would have been a problem. But he was there walking. I think we ended up walking about 4 miles that day to get to the entrance of Mount Hood Meadows, and finally a plow truck driver picked us up, took us up the hill.
Heavy. That sounds like a bad time, dude.
I can't wait till you do a blade dive with Joel Rarico, because I've got a question for him about who lost the car keys to that rental car that week.
Ooh, let's go, Joel. Jump on the blade dive. I would love to have you, man. That's a hilarious story, by the way. You transitioned back to the East Coast. Where was that, and how did that go?
Yeah, my first year working at June Mountain, which was my second year on the West Coast, my old man got diagnosed with brain cancer. And, he's still alive. He's fine. But there was definitely some questions there at the time, and there was some pressure from my stepmom, like, hey, you really need to be back here with your dad, and we don't know what's going to come of this. And it was mostly just her, like, I don't know, putting a bunch of doubt in my brain. But that was a big part of why I moved back east. Not many people really know that, but that was a huge factor in going back to Virginia. And yeah, I actually thought I had a job at Massanutten that winter grooming. And, I talked to my old buddy, Mike Mueller, and he's like, yeah, we don't have a spot. Like, everybody came back from last year, which they have, 2.5 snowcats to groom the whole hill. I think it's 90 acres. So it was really wishful thinking on my part that I could go back there and groom. But yeah, I moved back to Virginia and started a construction company and was out of the game for a while.
Yeah, see, and that's heavy. It's hard to do that. I think there's been multiple people that I've talked to, even on the show, that it's like, man, it's hard to find something else that satisfies you as much as this job does. So, were you passionate about the construction thing or no?
I mean, passionate, that's a no. I mean, did I want to do good at it and succeed? Yes. And I did all right. But I got smashed pretty hard with like the 2009 um, economy crash and was out of work pretty quickly, which wasn't good. And I missed the industry like hell, like you wouldn't believe. Um, I missed the snow so much. Uh, yeah, that I ended up going back, obviously.
Yeah. Well, so was it mostly the adulting and all the responsibilities that kept you on the East Coast? Why didn't you just jump west?
Well, I mean, I had a lease, in Virginia. I had a house to pay for, and yeah, I just there's like 4 resorts within drivable distance from there, and it's like Bryce, Massanutten, Wintergreen. Maybe there's only 3. And snowshoe is a long haul for you couldn't day commute there. But yeah, actually, me and Jeremy Klein, Deaf Kid, went over to Wintergreen one day. I'm like, I wonder how their park program's doing. I wonder if they need help, or is everybody caught up with the West Coast. And we took a day trip over there and like bought lift tickets and like took one run. And I remember getting back in my truck after one run, and I was like looking between the seats, and and I'm like, Jeremy, like, I was like, where's the flux capacitor? And he didn't get my joke, and I was like, dude, we just traveled 10 years back in time and
Yeah.
rode a snowboard park from like 1998 or whatever, and I was like, boy, they could definitely use some touching up. And no disrespect to those guys if any of them listen to this, but they were they could use some love. So I applied for a job there and just grooming their parks, and I got it, and I got back in a cat there, and I got in a steering wheel 200 park bully, and did what I could with that place, and it was actually a really, really pivotal, fun part of my career. I won't lie.
I'd say it'd have to be because there were probably some takeaways that you had from working at a place like Wintergreen.
Well, first of all, building a park with a yoke cat was very new to me. It was a park bully, which was nice, but like it was like starting from scratch. Um, they had an idea but didn't have the right people to implement. They had the acreage, they had a lot of things in place that could be successful, but um I don't know, man. Like, that was like that was a very pivotal part for me, I won't lie. Like, to go from being at Mammoth in June and Superparks and blah blah blah, all the build giant piles of snow, to go back to like the roots and like build like the most simple park but do it right, like a good, like, smallish medium park. and see the kids come out and like literally do cartwheels when they see a properly built park for, you know, the first time at their resort. That was honestly way more rewarding than a lot of things I've ever done in my career. It was like providing this venue for these kids that just didn't have it before.
Mm.
You know, I met some really cool people and some, you know, locals that just were blown away by the slightest bit of effort from me.
Oh, I'm sure it was much appreciated. I have appreciated Kevin Soller's contribution to your episode. He's your next special guest question, so I will play that for you now. Here we go.
Joe, hey buddy, it's Kevin Soller. With all the years that you spent in a snowcat, how imperative do you think communication is in regards to identifying potential hazards that can be encountered while running snowcats? Specifically speaking, flat, light, and cut banks. Go ahead and throw me under the bus. What you saw me do is still hands down one of the scariest near misses I've ever had. Hope all is well, man. Later.
Oh, God. That's so funny. Did you tell him to ask that?
Well, I think there was maybe a bit of a push, but Kevin's on board because he's on board with the safety thing. Yeah.
So if you were to take like a feline, like an actual cat, like how far forward would you have to tip it before you saw its front set of nipples?
Oh boy. Oh man, probably pretty far.
So we're building the pipe, and you know we have this, you know, luxury of day pushing. We can close off the area pretty well, but like come weekends, we're tying up, you know, 3 or 4 trails in a chairlift. We have to like not take up the entire trail or all the way to the bottom. So we build this berm and to catch the snow cookies from rolling down into guests. And, you know, it's like, imagine like a U-shaped trail coming in together to one lift. And anywho, you know, on the uphill side of it, it doesn't look that bad. But on the downhill side of it, it's, you know, it was probably 6 feet-ish, 8 feet, like 8-foot drop. And, you know, come 4:30, that lift closes and we're allowed to get access to the bottom again. He drove over that wall. And I'll give him credit. He was creeping, and it was extreme flat light. But I've never seen that part of a snowcat before. It it was like it was pretty. It was a blade dive if there ever was one.
Oh
and
my
like,
God.
you know, I'm just like, I go over the radio and I'm like, that was violent. He comes, yeah, and he comes back. He's like, I had no idea. And we do deal with extreme flat light. No discredit to Kevin and his abilities, but that was like, yeah, yep. I saw the oil pan, and he was going away from me.
Oh my God, dude.
Poor guy.
Oh, poor Kevin.
It had to hurt.
Oh, I bet. Kevin, if you
Yeah.
still have a bruise, send a picture. Yeah. No, that's heavy. Well, I was excited that he wanted to tell, or at least have you elaborate on the story. But I've got another special guest question from Kevin, kind of a part 2 of his experience at Seven Springs. So here we go.
Joe, hey, it's Kevin again. One more question. One of the wildest things I experienced while I was pushing at Seven Springs was cracking into a whale and popping a live duck that had been buried by the snowmaking system the night before. Is there any truth to this being a common occurrence in Seven Springs, or were you guys just truly fucking with me?
That's a pretty funny question. We were absolutely just fucking with you. We had this voodoo lady come put a duck to sleep, and we buried it in the snow, knowing you would be pushing right there, and it would come to life when you touched it, Kevin. It just worked out perfectly for us. But for real, no, that happens. They fly into the snowmaking, they get confused, I don't know, like, I don't know. I don't want Ginger Carrico to get mad at me, but I don't remember science all that well either, or biology.
Oh my God.
But I think ducks are like partially cold-blooded, And it does like knock them out. Like the cold just knocks them out, knocks them to the ground. They get buried in a pile. And if you had one wake up and fly away, that's good, because usually you think you have a hydraulic leak, but it's really a duck smear. But yeah, it's pretty common.
Well, he and I were, because I was asking him about his experience there, and he and I were talking about that situation and just the weather, the climate, and then the animals. I mean, that's some science in itself right there, man.
Yeah, we have a weird environment. We have a weird scenario, and then our snowmaking system as well. Like, people come here, like Tyson has been here year after year after year, and to me, he's one of the best cat operators ever, and most experienced. And I feel like he's surprised every time at like how whiteout we can become from our snowmaking system. There's so many guns and so much moisture getting pumped out into the atmosphere. And once you hit like 12 degrees and lower, you've never been in anything like it. You think you've been in a bad snowstorm or, windy conditions. Like, this is, you just have to stop. You can't, you can't tell where you are, even if you've been there a million times. It's the most extreme conditions I've ever dealt with, and you're only like 600 feet from the parking lot. It's crazy how much we alter the environment with our production. And people were like, "Oh, no, I'm used to it." Then they get here and they're like, "You've got to be kidding me." And yeah, Kevin was victim of that in two ways, between the ducks and the shear wall he drove off of.
Well, shout out to Kevin. Oh, Kevin Soller.
Kevin's awesome, dude. His social media is hilarious.
Oh, man. I'm a big fan of Kevin Soller. Thanks to him for contributing to the podcast. And Joe, we've been talking for a while, and it's been super fun, man. And I thought that was a great way to kind of wrap it up. And just, I want to take a minute really quick to say thank you for all you've done, how you've contributed. I know you value your experiences. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Hey, Parker, thank you, man. Like, it's awesome. I think you've helped my crew out. I think when they started listening to your podcast and hearing other cat operators talk about their life experiences and their accomplishments and like what they're proud of, I really think they all upped their game. Honestly, because we are kind of pigeonholed here in Western PA, aka the Midwest, according to ERATH. And you kind of lose sight of like what we're part of, and if you don't get to do a Superpark every year or a big shoot every year, you kind of lose sight of what you're a part of. And I think the guys hearing you interview people around the world has definitely helped them. And thank you for doing this, man.
Huge thank you to Joe Genovese for being this week's Blade Dive episode. So many laughs in that conversation. I couldn't pick one that was my favorite, but I enjoyed the science conversation at the end about Seven Springs and their environment there. If you're not yet subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and do that so you can get those notifications weekly when new episodes drop. Be sure to follow us on social media and tell a friend about the Blade Dive. That's how this thing grows for sure. Okay, you know what to do. Don't be a dick. Fill up your machine with diesel at the end of your shift, please.